What is up, Scrub fam? Pat here, back with the final part of our Set 8 Malicious Machinations limited review. We're going to be covering the multicolor cards and the campaign rares this time, so I don't want to waste too much time. We're going to jump right into it here. Grading scale on the screen for those of you guys who have not seen it. If you missed any of the previous videos in the series, links are down in the description below. For you, those of you who are members of our Patreon, there will be a cheat sheet available for you guys with the 5 best common and uncommon cards like I do every set. So if you guys are looking for that, you can check it down in the Patreon in the description below. And then finally, got to give a shout out to our sponsor here, just like I do all the time, the man, the myth, the legend, Alec Pastrana. BeardedCollectibles.com. Bearded is got you covered with the best prices for sealed product on Set 8 as well as full play sets if that's what you're into. So yeah, definitely look up BeardedCollectibles.com if you're trying to pick up any of the cards you see in this video. So with that out of the way, let us move right into the actual cards. So Raditz. 4-drop 20k is a pretty solid rate. 1 cost 5k combo is pretty terrible. You'll never really trigger the permanent. That said, Raditz is still really good, as you will see with many of the super rares we talk about in this video. They are pretty much the defining things when it comes to your sealed pools. So 4-drop 20k is an alright rate. That's usually where we want to be. With a 4-drop, we want 20k or better. His auto, when you play him, you look at your opponent's hand, you get to take anything that's basically not a secret rare and discard, or warp it, I should say. You get it out of their hand, and then he gets critical for the turn. So this card's incredible. In a format where things are defined by bombs, like bombs pretty much are the name of the game in this format because the common and uncommon level cards are not good. You guys have been hearing me say it for a lot of this set. It's not that they're not good and constructed. They're amazing constructed, but they're so rigid that if you don't have mass quantities of them, there's no consistency. So there's just no generically good cards that you would expect to see in a set like, say, Draft Box 4, for example. There's not too many of those. So the format is basically designed to be whoever opens the better rares and super rares is usually going to win. So having a super rare that denies your opponent from having a super rare and then you get critical for a turn to boot is really hard to pass up. And it makes Raditz one of the better cards to take in this set or open in the set if you're in those colors. So I'm going to give him a 9, and it's largely, again, because he denies so many game-ending plays that your opponent probably only has 1 copy of. So a well-placed Raditz just ruins people. Next up is Son Goku Energy Salvo. Since this and Raditz are the only red-green cards in the set, you are pretty much never getting the Activate Battle. So this is a 3-cost 15k vanilla, and as such, it's a 7. It's a fair rate. It's not like particularly great, but we take what we can in the set because, again, there's not too many amazing options. Next up is Vegeta Energy Salvo. Very similar to Goku. It's basically just a 3-cost 10k blocker. None of the other effects really matter, so we give it an appropriate score of a 7 because, again, no negates in this set, guys. If you're not already aware, you've been hearing me say it pretty much ad nauseum. There's basically like a pseudo Crusher Ball effect, and there's a 1-drop with a negate, and that's it. So blockers are huge in this set because it's the only way you are protecting your life is using blockers. So having any kind of blocker is always good. So that's why Vegeta gets a 7. Next up is Hit Rapid Movement. You guys have heard me talk about this in the yellow video with Mai. So this card is super underwhelming when it comes to constructed. It's honestly, you kind of question why it's even a super rare. So 4 cost 20k is a solid rate. This card is premium removal in a format where it doesn't really exist. Hit has you covered for basically any and all bombs. If you somehow live through its first swing, Hit will clean it up and get rid of it. So it's pretty much good in all decks. I would even splash blue or yellow if you were in another color just for Hit. Like if you were in, like, say, blue-green, you're heavy in blue-green, I would splash a couple yellow cards such as the Mai that we talked about previously just to be able to play Hit Rapid Movement because he is that good. I'm going to give Hit a high 8 because he is just generically good removal with good stats for limited that any deck can play. Next up is Son Goku Dawn of Divinity. Just as a preface, man, yellow-red cards are just bonkers in this set, just like, especially limited. They're nuts out. So this is a kind of card where playing on the play, it's kind of borderline oppressive, but I feel like on the draw, he's a little bit worse. So he's basically a 3-cost 20k critical, and he draws you 2 cards when you play him because no person is ever going to crit the life. Let's be real here. So yeah, going first, dropping a 20k critical that your opponent has to deal with right away, or they will just chew through a ton of cards every turn. He's just really strong. I would give him a 9 if you're going first. because I think he's significantly better going first than going second. And if you're going second, I would say he's about an 8. So he's somewhere between a high 8, low 9. Critical just is the best keyword in limited. It continues to be so even more as time goes on, and I play in more and more formats. I find that critical is just defining. It's huge. Everything is just based around it. Anybody who's played a lot of Draft Box 4 knows that the critical on the front side of the leader literally is the format defining mechanic there, and I wish it wasn't there. So having an early crit beater that is pretty big is very hard to deal with, and you get a nice little bit of card advantage on it, so still a really good card. Next up is Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku, a heartfelt plea. Where to begin with this guy? This guy is just nutso. You're not really going to ever get the free-to-play effect off of this guy. There are ways to do it. It's just that it's a little bit convoluted in terms of like how to get pumps and whatnot. Like there are things like the Ape Goku, getting the bonus when you evolve on top of things. There's like you could eat a clone token in Android 21 if you're somehow playing some like 3 or 4 color weird stuff deck. So there are ways to get it into play, but it's very few and far between. He is basically a 5-cost 30k triple strike, and that's all I really have to say about that. I'm going to give it a high 9 in this format because there's no negates. That's why Majin Buu is upshifted to a 9 over an 8 from the last video. Just how do you block 30k consistently in a format where there's very few blockers and there's no negates? So basically Goku for 5 gets in there early and often, and it wouldn't surprise me if he is the best SR in the set in terms of finishing out the game, both in constructed actually and limited. He's just a monster. If you open him, I would find a way to play him. Like if you open this card, try to go his colors, because if you can stick him, he's pretty much just good game. All right, moving on to the next page, we have SS Vegeta Raging Frenzy. Is a 5-cost 20k double strike, which is an okay rate. And then has the if your leader's red, so if you're Bulma or Beerus and a Bulma is KO'd, you can play this card for free. As we previously discussed, Bulma SR is the only Bulma in the set that it really works with, but this card is generically good enough where I think I would want to play it even if I wasn't in Bulma. 5-cost 20k double strike in a format where there isn't too many other ways to close out a game makes me think that it's still worth playing. I would give it somewhere between a 7 and an 8 for the most part as far as score goes. It's somewhere around there. Obviously leaning more towards an 8 if you have Bulma. It's not the most impressive finisher, but it is just a rock solid finisher for a lot of decks in the color. And obviously if you are playing the Bulma and you actually open the Bulma in your opening hand with this card, kind of good game. You can run over a game really quickly with it. Next up is Beerus No Holds Barred, which is probably my pick for the most generically good SR you could open in the set. It's just well-rounded at all points in the game. 5 costs, 25k, so beefy stats. Even if you hard cast it, it's not a bad rate for just hard casting it. It's still sizable, but when you play it, you get to KO basically anything in the format that's not, excuse me, a secret rare, and then being able to lock down your opponent's leader can also be pretty good, or locking out a problematic card can be pretty good. But for the most part, you're usually going to just use it for the KO, especially if you get it on turn 2. This guy can just run away with the game really easily. He answers pretty much everything you could think of under the sun outside of a secret rare, like I said. And just like Goku, if you open him, there's very little reason to not try to just go into his color scheme or make him work somehow, because the super rares literally are the defining thing in this set. I'm going to give Beerus, just like Goku, a high 9 just because we're in a format where there's so few stellar and standout cards that when one of this caliber or Goku's caliber does arrive, it's pretty hard for your opponent to come back, if at all. Next up is Whis the Spectator. 2 costs 15k is what you're most likely playing this for, or it's dual color energy. I'd probably give it somewhere between a high 7 and a low 8 just because it is a decent stat spread for 2 costs. So there's no shame in playing this card if you have it. Next up is Great Ape Baby, the ultimate evil life form. You're almost never going to cast this guy. I don't even think you would want to cast this guy for his EX evolve cost, because correct me if I'm wrong, but Malicious Majesty is the only real target to evolve off of, and that card is significantly better than this card. So this is basically a 7 cost 30k double strike with a pretty juicy activate main that allows you to win the game if you get that far. So yeah, it's one of those things where if you get to 7 energy, you should just win. And I do think it is possible, especially with the quality of being so low in the set, it is possible to drag this format out longer than other formats. So yeah, I'm going to give Baby somewhere between a high 7 and a low 8. My biggest problem is that while I do think it is possible to get to turn 7 with this card because of the dip in quality of cards in this set in terms of their ability to close out games outside of SRs and rares, I feel like you're going to get there at low life total. So for the most part, he's just going to be 7 drop, draw 2 with a 30 double strike body. I don't think you're ever really going to get to use this activate main. You'll most likely be at 1 every time you get there. Next up is Malicious Majesty. This is probably the most headache-inducing card in the entire set. I am still astounded that this is not leader locked to Yellow Baby. It's just broken in this format. It's straight up just broken. There's not really a ton I want to say about it. It's just going to give it a 10. If you get the activate battle off, like, it doesn't even have to be him swinging. It could just be literally anything. You can swing with a 1-drop. It doesn't even matter. You can swing with a 1-drop 1k. If you get the activate battle and you have at least 2 life so you can actually take the life to trigger it, setting your opponent to negative 5k with at least 3 bodies on board plus leader swing, that's it. You win. There's no coming back from it. There's no counterplay against it at all. In fact, in Constructed, your only real counterplay to this card is Ultra Instinct Goku. That's it. So, yeah. This is a card that is going to be meta-defining both in Limited and Constructed, I feel like, and you better get really used to playing against it because you're going to probably be seeing it for at least the next month. Next up is Super Baby 1, All-Consuming Terror. 4-drop 15k is really lackluster. It does have some saving grace in that you can arrival it early on, which is probably a waste of cards. But if you do have the Union Absorb, which I think you actually could do if you open this card at the uncommon level, if you open Malicious Majesty, there's a pretty decent chance you have at least 1 copy of All-Consuming Terror. In that case, it's worth going for the upside, because getting out Malicious Majesty like turn 3, turn 4 is pretty much just GG. And as much as like I would probably give this card maybe a 5 for the most part, most of the time like we did with like Ghost Warriors, because 4-drop 15k is not that good. The upside of it having the Union Absorb pushes it somewhere into the realm of around a 7 as a one-of. If you do have 4 Brain Mosh cards or more and you have Malicious Majesty, it's definitely worth your time to play this card because Malicious Majesty is that broken in this set. If you don't, then it's, like I said, it's probably about a 5. It's mostly just filler. Its best aspect, actually, is that it is dual color. Next up is Supreme Technique Son Goku. 4-cost 20k blocker is actually pretty good. Relevant stats, relevant keyword. You're almost never going to get Arrival to work at all outside of 21 Scheme. But even then, it's pretty okay. Again, in a format like Limited, I'm not super jazzed about Arrival unless it does like a really broken thing like Beerus, because you don't have any real dual color cards, so you're almost always going -3 from hand to play Arrival. So I'm not super keen about playing this card for -3 from my hand, so it's most likely just going to get cast for 4 most of the time. But even then, at 4, it's still a pretty solid body, so I'm going to give it a 7. Again, it protects your life. It's a little bit overcosted for I want it for a blocker, but it is beefy enough where it can actually block 2 to 3 attacks. So you will get mileage out of him, and he will let you go pretty much into the late game. So yeah, again, probably, like I said, high 7, maybe low 8. It's a little, like I said, overcosted for a blocker, and it could get you killed. But there are niche scenarios, I feel like, where you will get multiple blocks out of Goku, and that's why I think he's worth taking a chance on. Also, he's a dual color, which is super important for some leaders, and he is your most reliable blue-green color energy in this format. Next up is Son Goku, Spirit of the Planet. 2-drop 15k, well, you already know that's going to get us at least to 7, but what makes him nuts is that if he dies, you can pitch 2 cards to bring him back, and then he has the ability to give himself triple strike mid-combat. That ends games. This card is probably, like the Vegeta Baby that we talked about in yellow, it's probably the 2nd best rare in the set, and so I'm going to give it a high 9 just because it's really hard for this card to not just pop off. Like, you play it, you swing. If you've got the energy and your opponent has like 4 or 5 cards and they don't have blockers because they certainly don't have negates, you're killing them. Next up is Son Gohan and Piccolo, Pupil and Master. 3 cost 15k barrier with Revive, which is nuts. And then also this auto, when it attacks your opponent, chooses a card in their hand and places it in their drop area. So this grinds games out really hard, and you can't use removal on it, and if it dies, you can keep bringing it back. There's really not too much to say about it other than that. It's just a generically good card, and while I don't think it just auto wins games on the spot, I think if you protect it, I don't think you can really lose. So I would give it probably somewhere between like a high 9. I might even consider it close to a 10. I really have to like go hands-on and play with the format more to know if Son Gohan and Piccolo really is that nuts, because on paper it doesn't even seem that impressive, but it's already doing very, very well in Constructed, and I think it's one of the best super rares in the entire set. As I said at the start of the video, you're going to notice a lot of these multicolor cards are getting the high grades because, again, the format is defined by the super rares and rares that you open, because everything else just doesn't function without them. So, yeah. If you open this card, just like we talked about with Goku, just like we talked about with Beerus, and this is pretty much your sign that you should try and force green blue. Next up is 17, and just like Whis, it's going to get you a 7 just because it's a 2 cost 15k. The auto on both this and Whis are almost never relevant, but they have niche scenarios where they can actually win you the game, so do keep that in mind. Next up is Android 16 Energy Amplification. I feel like this is the dud super rare. I mean, congratulations if you open it. This card's great and Constructed, but I don't feel like you would ever really want to play this kind of card in Limited. So for starters, bad stats. Its best use is that it's dual color energy. As good as ramping is, board presence is way more important. So having a 2-drop that can actually attack, I feel like goes a long way, more so than tapping out on 2 and then receiving 2 attacks rather than 1. Or, you know, because like if you have at least a body, your opponent might redirect an attack to the body to try and, you know, maintain field advantage. So there's not like a ton I feel like there's going for Android 16 other than the fact that he has a 2-drop 10k. I personally just think it's a pretty weak choice overall. I'd probably give him a 5. His best use is, again, that he is a dual color, and I wouldn't fault you for playing it just for its dual color energy. Next up is Hungry Lady. So 8-drop 25k triple attack deflect. So we always talk about how games don't go that long. I feel like, again, just like we talked about with the 7-drop baby, games might actually go long because of how poor the attacking cards are in the set outside of the leader. So the thing about Hungry Lady is you resolve Hungry Lady in Limited, you win. Straight up. Period. Like, as long as you're not at 1 life and don't have like crap for a hand so that your opponent's leader can just shotgun you, you drop Hungry Lady, you win. That's pretty much how it is. She just nom-noms everything. So in that case, I'd probably say it's somewhere between a 9 and a 10. It's if you actually have a deck built around this card to not take damage with a bunch of blockers so that you can resolve Violent Predator, then it's a 10. Because again, resolving it is just auto win. It's going to kill everything your opponent has and 95 to 99% of all of their energy. The game is it just slams the door shut. There's nothing they can do about it. The fact that it's 25k triple attack means that they're just dead. There's nothing that's happening. So yeah, I really like, arguably just in a vacuum, she is the strongest card in the set in Limited in terms of what the card actually does to your opponent when you cast it. Between this and Malicious Majesty, like, they just win the game when you play them, assuming that you're just not so far behind, or your hand is so depleted that your opponent just doesn't kill you if you don't outright kill them the turn you play it. So yeah, like I said, high 9, possibly low 10, probably second best SR in the set in terms of just what it does in finishing your opponent off. So overall, between this, Malicious Majesty, Goku, Beerus, if you're looking for like the 4 cards that you should be trying to play. Next up is Gigantic Bomber Dr. Uiro. So 3 cost 15k blocker already makes me like this card a lot, just like we talked about with Pan. I don't think it is as good as Pan. However, because you don't deck out, there's this really nice niche scenario where you can put 2 bombs that your opponent may have comboed away or may have gotten milled and put them underneath of Dr. Uiro, and then he's just like, alright, I'm going to sit here with them and deny you with the entire game. He's also, again, dual energy, so that accounts for something. I would give him probably a low 8 just because he is a usable blocker that has revive, so he will constantly be able to wall out a lot of stuff that's really, really nice. Yeah, I can't see him being higher than an 8 because he's not going to win me the game, but he is probably one of the best lines of defense you could ask for when it comes to this game. Or this, I should say, this set. Next up is Madness 1 Dr. Coaching. 2-drop, 5k blocker with revive is much appreciated. So this is a reusable blocker for most people. I will gladly keep pitching cards to revive him in order to not take attacks from things like SS4 Goku. And he's an uncommon, so any blue-green deck really kind of wants at least 1 or 2 of these. And they can get their hands on it and limited because he's the most reliable defense. And just like with Dr. Weirdo above him, it's going to get an 8 from me just because of how poor our defense is and how much I value it. Even if you don't get this auto, you know, it's still worth playing. So now we move on to the campaign rares. Vegeta Prideful Hero. This is going to be a no from me, dog. It's like between a 5 and a 4, just like we talked about with all the Ghost Warriors. 4 cost 15k vanilla seems bad. There's no real way you could ever hope to play the activate main because, again, Bulma is super rare. And the effect, actually, the activate main isn't exactly impressive. So, yeah, like I said, 5 or a 4, it feels kind of like a dud. Next up is Beerus, who's significantly better. 2 cost with 2 cost 15k is already a pretty good rate, so that would get you around a 7 for the most part, possibly to an 8. The best part about Beerus is that he picks up other Beeruses, and if you've been paying attention to any of our reviews, all the Beeruses in this set are good. All of them. The red one, the green one, the super rare one. They're all very good. So if you have one of those and another and this Beerus, you just get to recycle just really busted cards and replay them. So I really like Beerus a lot. I also think that Villainous is a significantly stronger keyword in Limited than Heroic. If you actually manage to open 2 of these, nixing 1 card from your opponent's hand by playing the second one is, I feel like, a lot better than you just cantripping. Next up is Son Goku Prideful Hero. 3 cost 10k is it's not really that good. It's activate main, that's not happening either. That's not happening. So his real saving grace is paying 4 to get triple strike and combo cards out of your energy as a last ditch effort. I think the rare is significantly better than this guy. I really feel like this card, even in constructed, is pretty underpowered. That said, I have to give him at least a 6 because he's got triple strike. Like, there's gonna be somebody somewhere that's gonna just drop this guy in the late game and be like, all right, just shotgun you with all the 10Ks of my energy and steal the game. Next up is Android 21, Destructed Villain. So 4 cost 20k, good rate. Villainous, like we said, a little bit better than Heroic. Auto, even if you have to blow up an energy, this card board wipes 99% of your opponent's cards. It's pretty much it's getting rid of everything that is not, you know, a rare or higher. So that's the bulk of what most people are playing. So it's not going to get rid of SS4. It's not going to get rid of the 5-drop Beerus or Malicious Majesty. And yeah, that stinks. But for everything else, she answers them beautifully. Board wipes are really powerful, especially one-sided board wipes. So I'm going to give her a high 8. I think this is probably one of the better ones you could open or hope to open for ignoble villain rares. Next up, we have Piccolo Prideful Hero. 4 cost 20k, like we talked about with 21, is a pretty good rate. We do kind of want to be in that area. He's got critical, which already means that he's ding, 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 going to hit somewhere around an 8 in terms of rating. And he has this pretty sweet activate main where you can choose one of your battle cards that you have in play and kill it to kill one of their guys, and they pitch a card. So you're not going to want to use the activate main a ton. It's just kind of like a nice to have thing, like desperation, like let me get rid of my 1-drop to kill his like super rare before it kills me next turn. That's what you're most likely going to use it for. You're not going to really ever want to use it on your actual attackers because you want those to grind the game out for you. And, you know, the discarding a card from your hand is also pretty nice. But again, the activate main, I'll be surprised if you use it more than 1 time in a game. I feel like if you used it 2 or 3 times, you were already winning that game anyway, so it didn't really matter. The main selling points are he is a 20k critical for 4, which is why he's going to get an 8 from me. Next up is Dr. Uiro, Destructive Villain. 4 costs 20k. It's already pretty solid. When you play it, you get to choose a Frenzied Warrior back from your discard pile, and then you get to KO something. So he gets a little bit, he gets the cantrip, he gets to KO something, which is pretty nice. Pretty solid body, and he has the ability to be cheated out in play earlier. Green definitely got the high end of the deal when it came to these cards, both constructed and limited, because I think both the green cards are actually pretty solid. The only knock against this Piccolo is that in constructed is he's got to go up against Draft Box 4 Piccolo, but that's for another video. Yeah, so Weirdo is actually quite good. Next up is Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku Prideful Hero. 3 costs 15k, that usually gets you like around 6-7 for the most part. Has barrier. There's not really much hard removal, so it doesn't really matter. Basically, when you activate Awaken and he's on board, he becomes a 35k double strike for the turn, which is pretty sweet. I just don't feel like, because it's a one and done and that's it. Yeah, like your opponent can block this, in which case this card doesn't do anything really. So it's hard for me to really want to give him an 8 without saturating the pool. So I'm gonna stick with my gut here and say that it's a 7 out of 10, just because most of the time he is a 3 cost 15k. Only in that one turn where you're about to pop off does he become a 35k double strike. And with the amount of blockers there are, smart players can easily deal with this card, and it feels like a pretty just use of your energy most of the time. Next up is Super Baby 2 Destructive Villain. So this is very similar to the Goku in that when you awaken, he gets a bonus effect. This one gets dual attack, and he already has base critical. So 3-drop 15k with base critical is a lot better than 3-drop 15k with base barrier in a set where there's very few cards that remove anyway. Also, the blocker argument, usually your opponent has maybe one blocker on board. So this guy just bypasses it because he's got dual attack. And again, he pays you dividends turn after turn after turn after turn. So I'm going to give him somewhere between a high 8 to low 9. I think opening him is like the consolation prize. You didn't really open the 3-drop Super Saiyan God Son Goku that we talked about earlier in the video. But he is a pretty close substitute. If you open this and that Goku, though, you're in the money. Significantly better card going first also, by the way. And then finally come to the last 2 cards of the set, outside of the secrets. Heroic Strike. So this card is actually pretty good for all decks. It is a 1 cost that gives you 10k, and you get to carry something 2 or less, which is, as you've seen throughout most of these reviews, a fair amount of commons in the set, and some of the rares as well. So this card is very good, and I would give it an 8 for the most part, just because this card will basically go in every single deck. It's not going to win you the game, but it is a 10k with upside that can be played in any deck. And if you do have any of the hero rares such as Piccolo or Goku or things like that, you will get a free draw off of their abilities because of its permanent. So yeah, again, there's not a single deck where if you open this, I wouldn't just play it. It's just generically good. Villainous Counter-Strike is the opposite. Villainous Counter-Strike is actually really good in constructed because of Android 21 Scheme. If you're not in 21 Scheme, do not play Counter-Strike. I don't feel like there are enough skillless battle cards besides Majin Buu that are actually going to see any real play. This card is basically a sideboard card if your opponent's in yellow with a bunch of Majin Buu 3-drops. So that's where I would put it most of the time. If you're in 21 Scheme, though, this card is like a 9. If you actually are playing 21 Scheme, it's kind of insane. The tokens are skillless battle cards. So being able to pay 1 to blow up your opponent's board is kind of backbreaking and can win games out of nowhere, especially since it's activate battle timing. So yeah, other than that, the only thing left to talk about is the secrets, which, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not actually on the website yet. They were shown on Facebook. So just my quick 2 cents, like I do with everything. Ultimates are really broken most of the time. So if you open it, you should pretty much always play it or force the colors that it's in. I personally think that Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta is the best card. After that, I would say is probably Janemba Baby because of the fact that when you resolve it, you probably win on the spot. But that's the same can be said about SS4 Vegeta. And then finally, I would say the Dragon Ball in terms of like rankings of where I think they would be in limited. Vegeta is just incredibly flexible, so he is either an answer to some of the most busted cards in the set, or he just wins the game on the spot, whereas Janemba Baby is a lot more linear. If I had to give them grades, I would give Vegeta a 10, I would give Janemba a 10, and then I would probably give the Dragon Balls a 9. So, if you guys are just wondering. So that's going to be it for me, guys. That is every card in Set 8. Enjoy your pre-releases. Have fun. I think this set is super well designed. I think it's probably, you know, my favorite one that I can think of, you know, in a long time. Because, like, I don't really have too many faults with this set when it comes to constructed. Obviously, yeah, limited could be better, but these sets aren't designed with limited in mind. That's what Dropbox is for. Hopefully, I have helped you guys out and made things much easier for you guys. Until next time. Bye-bye.